But let's move from the fallacious economic arguments and data arguments about the minimum wage to the moral ones. Let us find the most moral amongst us to tell us why people don't need a minimum wage. Who do we have that is the most moral amongst us, yet also has the ability to sound like the oldest junior high student in the country? Why, of course, it's Matt Walsh on the Daily Wire.
I do support a minimum wage, but the minimum wage that I support is zero. I think zero is the baseline. Zero should be the minimum wage. I definitely don't think the minimum wage, it shouldn't go below that. Okay, so there shouldn't be a negative. Nobody should.
Breaking news. Where's my breaking news thing? Daily Wire podcast host denounces slavery. There you go. That's pretty big. Go ahead.
Be charged money to work, so I'll say that. But zero is the cutoff. Zero is the baseline, should be the baseline wage for work, because that's the baseline amount of effort you can put in. It's possible for someone to do zero work, which means that they have earned $0. Do zero work at zero.
I would offer this that we're watching, assuming he's paid, is disproving his very theory there. Because I feel like we're watching someone who has put in zero effort or minimal effort, but getting paid far more for it.
I mean, I feel like he should be paying us to watch him.
On some level, we're getting paid to watch him. So that true, is actually happening.
Dollars, I think that makes a lot of sense. But when you skip from zero and you go all the way up to, say, $8 an hour minimum wage, $10 an hour, $15 an hour, $20, $25, I mean, there's no limit to it. Once you do that, it doesn't really make any sense. Because what you're suggesting is it's basically impossible for someone to do less than that amount of work in an hour. You're saying that if the minimum wage is $15 an hour, you're saying that it's impossible that anyone in America could do work for an hour and the work they perform could be worth less than $15. You're saying that's impossible.
Pause it. The guy just found out what the minimum wage means. But he doesn't understand. It's the minimum wage. So it means the least amount of money that you can get for working for an hour.
For having your labor reserved for that hour.
Right. Exactly. Because you can still fire people.
I mean, I wonder what Matt Walsh thinks about wage theft, which is basically the opposite of the dynamic he's talking about.
But let's listen to this, because this is fascinating. It really is like, I feel like I understand my my teenage daughter a little bit better when I watched this guy work through a problem.
You have to warn her against guys like this. And
believe me, she knows that. I'm just watching them work through sort of concepts that they don't seem to be terribly familiar with. That's interesting to me.
All the work that's being done across the country in any given hour, all of it is worth at least $15 an hour. I don't think that's true. I'll give one example. We could all point out examples, but just one example. I went to McDonald's the other day, as I have the unfortunate habit of doing on occasion. And McDonald's now, most of the McDonald's I go in now have those automated things where you can order touch screen things. But I usually avoid those because they're touchscreen, and so you can see the finger smudges on them, and I don't want to touch that thing. I mean, how often are those things washed? It looks like they're never washed. I don't want to put my hand on a thing.
I wonder how much it would be worth it to him to have that washed. Question. All right, go ahead.
Avoid those because they're touchscreen, and so you can see the finger smudges on them. And I don't want to touch that thing. I mean, how often are those things washed? It looks like they're never washed. I don't want to put my hand on a thing 100 other people have touched.
Yeah, we
right
get
before
it,
I'm about
Matt.
to eat. It's gross. When I can see their gross, greasy, disgusting hand marks on it. So then I went to the cashier, and so here's how that interaction that interaction went verbatim. And as I said, we've all had interactions like this. So I walk up, the cashier goes, "Can I help you?" Yes, I'll have the large number 1, please. Thank you.
Big Mac.
That it? Yes. That's $6.57. Oh, actually, sorry. Can you change that to a medium? Okay.
Pause it. I want to remind you, he's being paid for this. He's being paid money for this.
Isn't this a good
But here's the
time?
interesting thing. Now let's just stop here because this would also blow his mind. That meal number 1 for $6.57. That means that meal, according to Matt Walsh, you can't find that meal at a different price anywhere else in the country. Right? Because prices are fixed. There has to be more or less value on that. It's just this concept that he's saying that his service is not worth $15 an hour or is not worth the person who gave him service, the one who treated him nicely at McDonald's. I mean, give me a break. The idea that this guy could make $1 more than zero or any more than like half the people that we watch the stuff, even stuff that we disagree with, this is bad. Just from an entertainment perspective, it's bad. It's bad. I know I'm making money mocking it, and it's still painful.
It just blows my mind that he would think that he doesn't come off like the worst person in the world in this.
The point is that he is proving, maybe it's some type of art project, but he's proving that the value of labor is completely subjective. And sometimes you get super lucky and sometimes you don't get lucky. And setting a minimum so that people can eat and not be exploited is the same theory behind why we say children cannot work. We have child labor laws, or why we have 40-hour work weeks. Because we don't want people to be exploited simply because as a human being, you need to eat and need to have a place to sleep. You need food and shelter. Maybe you want to provide some other amenities for your kids or your family. And so that's what we've decided as a society. The more they talk about how people don't deserve a living wage, the more they insulate themselves. They will gain no new voters from this. And they will just remind people that the Democratic Party is the one who is ensuring that at the very least there is a minimum wage. That the idea that you set aside an hour to work and go work and create value beyond your wages for other people. And it's true. There will be some job loss because of this there has to be some. But the revenue generated will create other jobs.
Velocity of money.
Exactly.
Well, look, all labor under capitalism is technically exploitation. That's not a value judgment. That's just a
Well, it
fact
has
of how
to
the
be,
system
or your
works.
business would go out of business.
Yes, exactly. That's how it functions. But, there are certainly matters of degree. There's exploitation, and then there's the kind of hyper exploitation that we see with these kinds of jobs that don't pay enough for people to keep on living or reproduce themselves as a class, and that's one of the contradictions that we talked about this week with Teethy and Chidzia, the tendency of capitalism to, on the one hand, in order to keep functioning, it needs human beings, right? It needs workers to continue being alive so they can work. And on the other hand, its tendency to try to squeeze the conditions for social reproduction so much that people cannot reproduce themselves or stay alive anymore.
Right. They limited their bargaining power.
Much less serious point, but I'm not the biggest Jerry Seinfeld fan in the world, but he is an actual comedian who did actual structure to his jokes, and all of these idiots have grown up watching it, and they think that somehow, like, just complaining about the smudges or the fingerprints on the computer on the terminal that you use the fast. Like bitching and kvetching about that is sufficient for a bit without any structure around it.
It also
It's very
undercuts his entire point, which shows that you need
Should be paid a lot
human
more.
beings,
Indeed.
right?
I would argue, I actually worked at McDonald's in high school. I would argue that worker has probably put in as much effort relative to the amount that he's compensated for the cost of that number one meal that he got there. He's probably doing his part.
I mean,
I would also
honestly,
be really interested.
I would be. It would be fascinating to find out, like, sort of what the rate of pay that Matt Walsh is getting for this relative to the quality.
Yeah. Do you want a
would
little
also
bit more?
be
Let's
really-
listen to a little
It'd
bit
be
more.
interesting to see if this reaction to him was different than anybody else he interacts with in life.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
yes. What else?
Wonder why it
Anything else
is
you
all the
need?
clerks I go to all seem to be really annoyed.
Why does my mom hate me?
Yeah.
And that's how it went. Now, let me ask you, somebody like that, someone who that's all they do. That is the amount. They can't even be troubled to
That's all they
enunciate
do.
their words. Like, they can barely even put in the effort to speak. They're
is all Matt
barely
does.
sentient. You're almost watching them melt in front of you into this just lump of matter. They're barely even there.
Do they
because
deserve?
of just how utterly disinterested they are, and not only disinterested.
I'll just skip a little bit ahead because he does this for another minute. We can get
Oh
the
my
tail end
God!
of the clip.
It's just like, how much can I argue that this person's not worthy of $15 an hour?
They can do. This is what they're getting paid to do. You might as well
I
put a
skipped
little
30
effort
seconds.
in. They don't want to put any effort in. So with someone like that, are they worth 50 automatically worth is doing that? Sighing, rolling your eyes. Okay, is that automatically worth $15 an hour?
You know what I noticed? This guy couldn't even be bothered to put his frickin' his microphone on his shirt properly. Look at the way it's pinched. There's a proper way to put on your lavalier mic instead of throwing it
Wait.
on there. It's disgusting.
Why does he have a lav mic and that mic in front of him?
That's a good question. Sometimes you do that. They get both. I don't know. That's stupid though.
I'd also ask Matt, who determines whether work has been done or not? Because if
And
I was his
honestly,
boss, I'd be like, "You're going to go back and re-record that, buddy."
Look, you're going to put on a show. How about doing something with your backdrop that doesn't look like you're just sitting in your sloppy ass corner? I mean, are those? What kind of braces does he have on that shelving? It's embarrassing. Those are outdoor braces. God, it's disgusting.
I would like to personally shake the hand of whichever fast food worker was rude to Matt Walsh because you're doing the Lord's work.
That's unbelievable.
Could I make a recommendation as well? This week on the Trillbilly Workers Party podcast, which is super, super excellent, they had Emily Gundelsberger on, who wrote a book called On the Clock, What Low-Wage Work Did to Me and How It Drives America Insane.
I've
And
heard about that.
it's-
I think she's on our list to
Classic
Gundelsberger.
is all. I mean, Nickeled and
It's
Dimed
really
by
good.
Barbara.
Yeah,
Ann
it
Wright.
it definitely
That's
is
an
in that
amazing,
lineage.
Really brutal book. Really important book.
I mean, that's the I guess the clear point about this is the amount of wage theft that these types of companies do from their
Absolutely.
employees by making them do extra work and not fully compensating them.
And the way
Yes.
that people treat you, like you're less than human, like
Matt
you're,
Walsh.
like you're their slave,
like you're just
ve-
gonna melt away.
and like the psychological toll that takes on people, I think is very apparent from watching that clip just now.
And I can tell you this too. There's such a tremendous amount of emotional myopia involved in that, because I spent, I don't know, probably 3 years waiting tables, and there is no doubt that my disposition and perspective on what I was doing was much easier to deal with. The work itself was much easier to deal with because I knew, like, this is not what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. I have been given, sort of an elite education. I have access
Connecticut
to
College.
I have access to just about every possible resource. And I'm I'm not, I wasn't a Rockefeller, but certainly I have access to resources. My father's an attorney, and I know people who sell cars, and I know people who are electricians, and I know I have access to a lot of different resources. I know people who are, mortgage brokers or whatever it is. And I knew this was a way station for me. But the idea that you could say like, well, I don't have an education. There's not a lot of jobs around. I can either wait tables here, or I can go and, I don't know, dig ditches or whatever it is. I'm not saying that people should be sullen on every job that they should have, but at the very least, their job should provide them enough resources so that they can live a decent life. And maybe explore other avenues, but have the resources to be able to do that to some extent. I'm able to take a day off, or I don't have to go for that time and a half so that I can pay my rent. If I'm super ambitious, I can afford to not pick up the extra weekend hours and go investigate something else. I mean, resources beget resources. And to not be aware of that, I think, is both an intellectual and emotional deficit, particularly by someone like, I don't know what Matt Walsh's background is. Maybe he was just working at a McDonald's, and every time he would come up, he would get someone to come up at the counter. He would be so effervescent that somebody said, "Hey, you seem like a great guy. I'm going to tell this other restaurant about you, and you're going to work your way up through the restaurants." And then he got a job at like a, more of like an Outback Steakhouse type of situation. And he was there, and he was serving somebody, and someone said, "Hey, we've got an opening at the Daily Caller.
He was bringing a high chair for Ben.
Would you like to do a podcast for us?" And that's the way I got discovered, by just being outgoing at my restaurant job. Give me a break.